never seen a smile so big on my little old lady's face until I tell her I'm going fishing all weekend. Pack up all of my bacon, I make plans for 7:45, then I swing around, pick up my date for the weekend. Some reason she seems to please when I'm leaving. There's something I'm missing when I'm gone fishing. When I'm gone fishing. When I'm gone fishing.
Yeah, baby.
Yes, sir. Oh, it's so awesome to see all you CFNers. It's really cool, man. It really, really, you know what? This makes my week. I hope it does yours. But seeing all you folks, this is awesome. What's up, James? How you doing, my friend? Tony's in the house. How many brown pops today? I don't know. It's up to you, Tone. None for me as of right now because I'm working. Brad Frost, as I mentioned, great post with the family, dude. That was absolutely awesome to see. Trisha's in the house. Good to see you. Jay Pierce is here as well. Sonia, that was a really interesting post, and we are going to be getting, obviously, on the topic of goby, an invasive species. So that's what you showed today with that python, that or constrictor. I'm not sure what it is. If they're the same, who knows? But needless to say, that was one big arse snake. And thankfully, as Dave Clark said, it's a good thing we got some winners. I don't know if this is a cold enough winter for those, but to see them at Arundel Park, that is troubling. Adrian, always a pleasure to see you. Bob, isn't it? Yeah, baby. Jeremy's in the house. Terry's in the house. Well, listen, we've got lots to get to. Bill Andrews here. Awesome to see you, my friend. Lloyd Braun, all you guys and all your posting. Like, all your sharing, I can't thank you lads enough. And lasses, all of you who do some great things for this community, we truly appreciate. And of course, we're hoping that we can give back in a huge way, not only to the community, but of course the vendors that support us. Brad Norris, I see, just jumped on here, and Brad would want me to remind you, as we are going to be doing for the next 4, considering tonight, 4 consecutive Mondays leading up to the CFN Appreciation Day, which is the Made in Canada Tackle Show and Tackle Swap that's going to be happening in Woodstock. Tonight, we are going to be giving away $100 in show bucks. So if you've already pre-bought a ticket, you're good. You're eligible. For those who have not, please go to www.canadiantackleshows.com and make sure that you get your pre-purchase tickets so that we know, one, that you're coming, and two, you're going to be eligible to win $100 in show bucks. And if you are here during the live when your name is drawn, we're going to add in another $20. All right. So, folks, Steve, thanks so much for the link there. Again, that's what you need to go to if, in fact, you are looking to attend. We've got some great presenters. Big Jim's going to be our MC. We've got Mr. Baker, who's the kayak guru. We've got Sparkus, who's on here as well, and, of course, Jay, who we'll be speaking with later. But needless to say, I can't thank the entire community, all you wicked vendors, and of course our CFNers for getting the word out there, because it is literally everywhere. It's just, I don't know. Makes me speechless, man. I'm telling you, you guys are friggin' awesome. Absolutely awesome. Well, I have to start tonight with a little bit of a public service announcement. If you haven't watched the news, if you're not aware that the groundhog saw its shadow, if you haven't been out on the ice, if you haven't been outdoors, or you haven't been listening to CFN Live and our good buddy Big Jim, who reinforces this issue over and over again, Don Lewicki was on today, I saw on CTV News, talking about the state of the ice out on Lake Simcoe. And if this is the last thing you hear before you maybe have a trip planned, and I'm not certainly trying to steer business away from all of you wicked vendors, please keep this in mind, the thickness of ice. when they're going to the media to express concern because they've had so many vehicles fall through, including people and merchandise and valuables and what have you. They're tired, and they also don't want to see someone not make it back. So it's at that point. I know if you're out there a lot, you already know where the safe places are. So that'll be, your story to tell. It's certainly not going to be ours. We would never say that there's safe ice. But if there's ice that's passable and you know about it, I would suggest at this point you might want to keep it to yourself unless you're trying to save a life. Because I'm going to tell you, the weather outside doesn't look great, whether you're here in Ontario or you're out west. The days of the hard water season seem to be coming to an end, but we will have to wait and see. But as I said, very important that we pay heed to what's going on from all of our first responders, because let's face it, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are supposed to be keeping us out of trouble. And if they're telling us not to go on the ice, or at least on Lake Simcoe, let's listen to them. I want to live. Don't you? Absolutely. Okay, going through the list of stuff. Good buddy Sergio wanted me to mention this from Trolling Real Deep Sport Fishing. As it is right now, for anyone that's interested in pre-booking a trip for the upcoming season, they will honor last season's pricing until the end of this month. Unfortunately, like everything else, our operating costs are going up, especially fuel costs. All you need is a $100 deposit, and the rest is due on the lake of the day of. They will be participating in the Silver Salmon again, so let's try and take home a king for the leaderboard. And if you have any questions, reach out to Sergio, myself, or anybody else at Real Deep Trolling sportfishing.com. But yes, Sergio, thanks so much for sharing that. Of course, we have the show season, which is upcoming. And Steve, if you're probably in the background sharing links. If you are, I apologize for not getting them up. I got to follow this as I see it. So obviously the spring fishing and boat show is coming up very, very soon. As you can see, February 16th is the start. Family Day weekend. OFC Nation is going to be there along with a whole host of others. We'd love to see you there. There's lots to do for the kids, lots to do for you anglers. And of course, Mom, there's a food court and a few other things that hopefully will pass some of the time while your boys are in oohing and on and all stuff that either they can or can't afford. But needless to say, spring fishing and boat show, looking forward to that and seeing all of you folks there. Right after that, we're going to be down with this group, of course, at the Ottawa show. And what a great weekend this was. It starts on the 22nd, goes to the 25th. So as you can see, it's basically the following week. Our buddy Steve, myself, Big Jim's going to have his casting pond for the kids. Steve and I are going to be helping out. We are going to have a booth, but we'd love to see as many CFNers show up to that as possible. And of course, this is the big one for us. This is the Made in Canada. Well, it started as a day of appreciation for CFN and all you CFNers, vendors, and everyone else who's had a hand in building our community and getting the message out there of what CFN is all about. March 3rd, it's a Sunday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. As it is right now, all the booths are gone. All the booths are sold out. Not only are they sold out, but we had to take on another section of the show, the facility, in order to house some of the swaps, because there's not many of those tables left either. There's only like 5 or 6, I think Brad was saying. But anyway, we are at the last little bit. So needless to say, if you are interested in going, please sign up, give us a call, and let us know. Also, we are going to be at the Toronto Sportsman Show, March 14th to the 17th. We'll be there with the Next Gen events and the Friends Outreach. So we're looking forward to seeing everybody at the Toronto Sportsman Show. And of course, last but not least, CanCast, April 7th. Hoping to see all of you there. Some great prizes, some great seminars, and a whole bunch of other things that are going on. Now, last but not least, before we get to our very valued speakers and the wonderful panel that we're greeted with each Monday, of course, the CFN retreat up at Horwood Lake Lodge. I'm happy to say, talking to Warren, but I think it was 2 weeks ago, but also Richard has reminded me a bunch of times, Richard Dunlop, There is only one cabin available, one cabin that sleeps 4, one cabin available. So please reach out to Warren and Doris and make sure that cabin is yours to book. And if you need a little bit of a teaser, here's 30 seconds of it. That is August 11th to the 17th. What is so amazing about this, as I said, not only is it already packed and we already have the deposits to prove it, the cost, it's still $875 for the week. And you don't have to worry about your food. You don't have to worry about where you're going to sleep because there'll be a bed provided. All the linens, of course, all your toothbrushes and toiletries. And it's also going to include a boat with fuel and bait. So needless to say, it's a no-brainer. $875 plus taxes for the week. Get it booked, get it done. We'd love to see you there. And of course, the last one that is going to be happening in September is, of course, at this wonderful place, Camp McIntosh. Looking forward to that. That is September 27th to the 29th. If you want to be like the rest of this group, this very handsome and good-looking group, we'd love to see you up there. Of course, please get a hold of Andre and Tracy. There is still spots available. And if you're not sure, you need a little bit of a tease, it is Monster Monday. Here is a Macintosh minute, and all the monsters that you could possibly catch. Right on. So look forward to seeing you guys there. As I said, that's who you want to get in touch with, Andre and Tracy. Please book now. Please get it done as soon as you can so that we know that we've got a full house and that we can expect you all there. We got Big Jim coming up right after a word from our sponsor.
Yo, yo.
What an honor it is, Big Jim, to see you each and every Monday, my friend. Not to mention all the other times that we get to talk after the show, but I'll tell you, I do look forward to this just the same. Because as I said, man, it's like spending some time with the person that you looked up to the most. Yeah. Oh, attaboy. Good for you.
Really fits, though. I've heard that before, though.
I was
Best thing ever was going to buy. I had an incident where I had a suitcase stolen out of the truck, and I had a pair of sweatpants on, and I had to go buy some clothes at the Toronto Sportsman Show years ago.
yes.
And I go in this big size fancy men's store place, and I said to the guy, "Hey, I need 2 pairs of pants fast." And he looks at me, and he's got the measuring tape around his neck, and he goes like this and pulls the tape out. He looks at me and looks at the tape. He goes and gets a bigger tape, and he measures me, and then he says to me, "You're taller laying down than you are standing up." That's always stuck in my mind to this day. And he said it, and then he sort of looked at me and thought, "Oh my God, he's gonna kill me." He fixed me up. It was awesome. He waited while he hemmed pants and everything.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Yep.
That's awesome, Jim. Listen, I know you've been busy. It is show season, so you're getting ready. You're
Almost,
getting stock ready and what have you. As I said, we're looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing you at the Canadian CFN Appreciation Day. But we are here to discuss what is something, and I'll tell you, I really appreciate where you sit on this because you've seen this fish come into existence. It is now sort of finding its way, and who knows? I mean, somebody who said that. Are you going to talk about pickerel tonight? I said, you know what? No, Jim doesn't have that kind of time.
Hey, don't laugh. Somebody caught one in front of Kingston, like in the end of November, like a real life chain pickerel. Now I've caught.
Is that the big one I saw that Sticks and Stones shared?
I don't know. No, this was just some guy. Well, it could have been. It was just a guy in Kingston. He sent me a picture. It looked like it was maybe 20 inches, but I caught a giant one years ago, not knowing how big it was. I wouldn't have kept it or done anything with it anyway. Over on the American side, and they're quite common, like Black River, Chameau Bay, that area. Like you wouldn't want to have. I don't think you'd want to have to go to try to catch one in the bed, but the year wouldn't go by if you fished over there that you wouldn't catch a few.
So we
caught one that was like 6 pounds or something. It was like just.
Oh yeah. Okay, that might have been the same one. That might have been the same fish that I saw. But needless to say, with the fish off, we're blessed to see where some of those chain pickerel, grass pickerel, and other kinds of pickerel come out of. And Manitoba is a real hotbed for a lot of the pickerel that we see during the fish off. But eastern parts of Ontario and Quebec, we also see half decent numbers show up there as well. So yeah. It's really cool. Now, speaking of cool, as I said, Jim, you have sort of seen this evolve from the time of its existence. And this is what's so cool. So the Goby discussion that we're going to talk about today, and it's not going to, basically rob all of the discussion, but we're going to talk about it at great length. And we're going to start with in the beginning. And in the beginning, if anybody doesn't understand where this all started, invasive species with the Great Lakes and what they're doing inland waters, I'd love for you guys just take a couple minutes and just watch this. And more importantly, I need to thank some people because I have used some resources like this one, the Great Lakes Now. It's fantastic. If you want to see some great documentaries on fish and the Great Lakes, this is a must page to go to on YouTube. This gentleman who's fairly new, Badgerland Fishes, I got some resources off him as well. And of course, North American Fishing, great publication. Great to see some of the stuff that they're putting out as well. But have a look at this. This is in the beginning when it all started with invasive species in the Great Lakes.
Of its 10,000 years of life, the Great Lakes was protected by the Niagara Falls from invasions of non-indigenous species. But in the early 1800s, the Welland Canal was carved out, allowing ocean-going ships to bypass the falls and enter the Great Lakes. And with the large vessels came an aquatic species whose natural home is in the Black and Caspian Seas. Since its arrival in North America, the round goby has slowly made its way from one Great Lake to another. This strange-looking, diabolical fish forces many native species out of their territory and even eats their eggs.
There's no question.
So we just lost Jim there for a sec. Hopefully he'll be able to pop back on. It does happen from time to time, but when it comes to, if folks aren't aware, in the beginning, of course, when it comes to Gobi, they all came in during that flood and construction and urban sprawl that was going on. We've got Jay here. Maybe I'll bring Jay in. Jay?
Well, the Gobies heard Jim talking about him, and the Gobies sabotaged the signal. That's all I'm going to say about that.
100%. I think it's really cool because I think a lot of folks maybe that started into angling late, understand their existence, maybe don't understand where they came from. And just to clear everything up, Jay, was there anything you wanted to add when it comes to the beginning of where all these fish originated from?
Well, it's kind of neat. So you saw the picture of the Caspian and Black Sea in Asia, which is that would be the east end of the Mediterranean. And so that's where they came from. But it's amazing that the Gobies are not really like, I read a quote a few days ago about Gobi, and people talk that sort of dark music that's in that Silent Invaders episode, right? It's kind of funny that is portrayed for Gobi, because Gobi came here. It was like picking up the idiot neighbor kid that doesn't want to leave you alone. It's like, hey, come on in the van, buddy, or just leaving the van open. You ever just leave the van open or the truck open and like the neighbor's cat gets in, and then you might end up leaving your, holy crap, there's a cat in here. Like, that's how Gobies came here. There was no maliciousness. There was no evil Gobi. Like, they literally they got sucked up into a ship, and then they got dumped into the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
And why that happens is, and I'll give you the short version if I can. You have ships that have all this cargo, right? So they come over, so they leave the Caspian Sea, and they have to balance out their ship. So they suck in a bunch of water to counteract the lack of weight on the ship. And then they come over here, dump the water, and then they take on their cargo, right? Because ships have to maintain a certain ballast. And that's literally how they got moved around. And now what we do is a lot of the ballast water is dumped out in the marine environment. So you have Caspian Sea freshwater, which is dumped out in the ocean before they come into the St. Lawrence. There's actually been decades of research on this now because of zebra mussels, because of the round Gobi. Gobi were first dropped off somewhere in the upper Detroit River. That's what we think. So the bottom part of Lake St. Clair, upper Detroit River, probably around 1993, I think, in the early 90s. So, they've been here, what's that, 30 years, right? Is that 30 years? Yeah, 30 years they've been here. So, and but they haven't spread on their own. They were within every Great Lake within, I think, a few years of that first record. And I always think about it as Pesh Island, I guess. And I know Sparkus, you'll, and other folks who fish Lake St. Clair, you know where that is. I don't know for sure, but that's where the first observations of them were. And then they spread, but they spread by ships. So those same ships with the ballast water, you have these international cargo ships that come back and forth from overseas. But there's a whole fleet of cargo ships in the Great Lakes that travel around too, and they follow the same process. And so Gobi spread, and basically most places where they were observed were close by to shipping wharfs where ships docked and exchanged cargo. So
Jay, you did a fantastic job. As I said, you pinched hit in such an apropos way. You were right on par. So thanks. I got Big Jim back here. So we'll see you shortly, my friend. Oh, he was just here. Oh, poor Jim. Oh, Jim. I know he had to get going, and I know he had a lot on his plate. Oh, wait a minute. There he is. There we go. Big Jim's in the house.
Like 4 or 5 times I've gone away.
Yeah. I don't know if you're having, and you're frozen right now, so I don't know if you're having bad internet tonight, Jim, but
I don't know.
Yeah.
It shows it's there. I disconnecting, coming back.
No, you're doing the right thing. So basically, Jay was very nice of him to jump in when he did. Gave us a little synopsis on how they spread, how we got them here. Jim, I'd love to know, in the beginning when you were fishing and these things were starting to overpopulate under the boat. They were starting to become an issue. When was the first time that you can recall either catching one or taking notice of one and saying, holy crap, what's that?
It was probably like, I couldn't give you the years. It's probably 20 years ago.
Yep.
Jay would know for sure when I saw them, but when I first saw them was in the St. Lawrence River. And when I first saw them, there was lots of them by the time they were there. And I didn't realize or know I just figured they were, like a minnow, something on the bottom there. You just happen to, come across a bunch of them, it's, I've seen some pretty wondrous things in my life on the water. And I just looked down and figured it was just another thing, it was probably the same week that I saw a school of channel cats in the St. Lawrence River that was probably the size of my house.
Oh, wow.
Like, there was like tens of thousands of them. And they were anywhere from like 5 to 15 pounds, maybe. And I'm going through them with the electric motor coming from behind them, and they're just moving. And you can't, and then poof, they're gone. And I went back to try to find them, and they were gone. And it was the same thing with the gobies that went along. But I noticed after a few years, especially in the eastern basin of Lake Ontario, out in Sandy and Big Sandy and those bays on the end of Amherst there, you'd be out there and the bottom would start to move. Like it'd be in about 8 feet of water, and it's crystal clear on a sunny day, dead calm. And you would see the bottom just moving, because they don't swim up, they all just sort of move along the bottom. And it was a pretty wild thing to experience. And then I know a lot of the kids things that we did in Brockville when I lived in that area, started seeing the kids catching, bigger ones. They were like 5 inches long maybe, and we'd only seen them like this. And that was when I know at some of the kids thing, they came down and they had a guy walking around with a plastic bag collecting all the gobies. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, like you don't have enough plastic bags to get the gobies out of this marina, let alone, you know what I'm saying though? Last year, when I did the big thing in Brockville at Gananoque on the waterfront with the Gananoque Police Service, there was a lady there had an absolute meltdown on some people for throwing a goby back in the water. Mm-hmm. Like I'm talking like, I hate to use the Karen word, mm-hmm. but she had an absolute meltdown. Like her eyes were spinning opposite directions in her head. These parents are fishing, the kids catch this little fish. Dad grabs it, up the hook, and throws it back in. Is what he doesn't know anything about gobies. Brought his kids to introduce it to fishing.
And hopefully, I tried to explain that up for us later. You're 100% right, because at the end of the day, I think there's a split camp when it comes to what we're actually supposed to do with these fish.
Well, legal. Some guy told me legally, I don't know if it's true or not, that you're not supposed to put them back in the water, but I can't see that.
Yeah,
I would think that, because they usually don't do anything that kills things like that to speak of.
Yeah, 100%.
But regardless of whatever it is, and then I saw a kid maybe 5 years ago catch one that was like 8 inches long, 9 inches long. Like, it was a fish. You could have brought it home and eaten it. Like I joked about that, having the fillets put away. This was like big enough to eat, like if you wanted to,
And this is the thing, like at the end of the day, when they were first sort of introduced or we discovered them in our waters, and I know Jay's going to help us when it comes to what waters they prefer, because I think if you look at their characteristics, it's more brackish water that they're interested in. But I mean, there's not a lot of brackish water in the Great Lakes. So
St. Louis, there's not. I mean, but the zebra mussels made it be that as clear as it is.
Yeah.
Like, even the back bays on the St. Lawrence now, where it used to be murky, and you could catch a lot of fish on buzz baits, because buzz baits work really well in murkier water.
Yeah.
Noise. And it's basically crystal clear now most of the year, unless there's been heavy rain or something, to make it come. But yeah, there's so much of that out there now, Scotty. When you see this, there's the St. Lawrence River. I don't know how many, cajillions of them that there has to be. But I mean, there's places out there now where I saw a guy, he had a picture of him walking, and he had a camera on a stick, like he must have had one of the cameras on a stick, and he was holding it down in the water. And the gobies are this deep on the bottom, and he's walking through them, and they're just, the way they just flit up and they're around all, just, moving everywhere and going everywhere. But, like we talked about earlier, there's so many things out there. And I just, I have that thing in my mind that everything we do to prevent this stuff, all you're doing is prolonging the inevitable. Like it's, you're not getting rid of gobies, like Jay said when we were talking earlier. That's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
With zebra mussels, we were all supposed to die. The Great Lakes were supposed to be dead, or Lake Erie was supposed to be dead in 3 years or something, they said. And look at Lake Erie now.
Yeah, it's so true. And
walk across the guys in it. In fact, I guess a lot of them spawn on old zebra mussel beds. All the little shells make great places for the little fish to live when they hatch, things like that. So it's I mean, does anybody really know?
No. And you know what, to your point, we'll likely get to that with Jay and
what he mentioned. I won't mention that, but and I never thought of that, or that didn't cross my mind. It hasn't, in the scope of science, it just happened. It's not even worth it. It's all almost not even worth discussing, because it just hasn't been enough time for there to be a result.
It's so true. And when I was watching this, I had to think back, Jim. Back in the day, can you imagine trying to undertake the Welland Canal now? Can you imagine, you see the construction that's involved in the Welland Canal? Can you imagine this undertaking now?
Wow.
No. That's a resounding no, 100%.
I remember years ago, once again, it's like an eternity ago, when Shimano invested a ton of money when they found, I forget the name of the little river that runs into Lake Simcoe now, but they sent the catch and release boat out, and the MNR was there, and they sent me out as an able-bodied young man to help if anything needed to be done. And there was a bunch of us there from Shimano in the catch and release boat, and they put out the shocking thing, and they killed. I think it might be Innisfil Creek. I think.
Okay.
When you head? It'd be, I guess, west along the bottom of just before, when you're on the way to Barrie and you turn left. What's that first town you come to, where the bridge is over the creek?
I want to say that's Innisfil.
Is it? Okay, I think it was that goes down and out into the lake, and we spent all day going up and down there with the shocking thing, and we scooping at the front of the boat and anything. We actually got gobies. I scooped up a beautiful brook trout, about a pound.
Oh wow!
And see, that's how they know that brook trout came from. There's a place there that sells bait, and he's right on the water, so that would be where the bait and the gobies probably came from. I mean, they were going to get there anyway, probably 15 years ago or more, and it was when they first got in there, and this was supposed to stop gobies from getting into Lake Simcoe, and everybody said it would. It was all they had to do, and whatever else. So Shimano ponied up with the monies and the boat and the people, and they did. And so they, we had a lot of dead gobies. I think they found some other little fish too that was invasive, but the guy said there was only one, and he said it was probably somebody who dumped an aquarium that had it in it.
Well, that's a whole other topic. You talk about exotic invasive species, because let's face it, there's invasive that aren't that exotic. We may have thought of them at the time, especially when we were told about them, Jim. And I do remember back in the 90s when there was a lot of shock and awe, and there was a lot of dramatization, because at the end of the day, and that's why we love our scientists and our marine biologists, because they temper some of that shock and awe, and they get us down to the brass facts. But needless to say, much like you just said, we were concerned about our sport fishery, and they had led us. And Jay wanted me to remind you that he was on that shocking boat with you.
Get out of here.
That's what he just said. I was on the shocking boat with you. So I'm hoping we got it right. I'm not sure what the river is.
So this must have been before I met him, like before I met him through CFN and got to know him.
It's amazing. It's a wonder anybody's met anybody before CFN. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, that's cool. I'm all excited.
That's hilarious. But needless to say, I'd love to know, because you now see grumpy baits, impact baits, set the hook. Like, there's a whole bunch of plastics, True North fish,
everybody,
True North baits. You have so many that are replicating the goby plastic. At what point, or did you ever get a time in your career where you were starting to use that as a presentation?
No.
Okay, so I think it's important, and your career when it came to tournament angling started. It basically ended when, Jim? Like early 90s?
Early 90s, yeah.
Early 90s.
Like I only did it for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I fished some into the I guess the 93, maybe 94 would have been the last ones that I did. And it was more or less things that I did that were, one weekend things. I normally wouldn't have done that type of stuff, because the prize was $1,000. I mean, I wasn't going to spend 800 to have a chance at winning 1,000. I just didn't do that. Although I did it often, I was lucky. But no, I've always been of the firm belief, a bit about matching the hatch. Man, why would I put something down there that there's already 10 million of them there? Unless there's like, I know this blueback herring bit in the States where they live on these open water bait fish and stuff like that. There's a little more to that, I think. But there's so many little critters on the bottom down there with the gobies. As far as I'm concerned, if you put something down there, I mean, you got to remember, we caught lots of fish on things before we had gobies to put on. We used to use little 3-inch finesse worms, and remember they brought Western weenies over here from Kalen's. They were little straight-tailed worms, just 4-inch long piece of plastic, just round, about half the width of a pencil. I think I've showed them to you. Sometimes I still have some kicking around, just little weenie things, stuff like that. And I just, I'm not saying you can't catch fish with that stuff. Obviously, it works.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things work. You can put on almost anything on a fishing line down in the water and catch fish on it. But I was never big on that. It just it wasn't something that I just really delved into or believed. I thought it was more about just being where the fish are. Was the whole deal. You had to have the fish around you to catch them, and I knew what I had, I could catch them. So
now your tournament career is over. You're still doing the shows. Is there a time that you could remember doing a show, whether it be with Mercer, Zumi, or anybody else for that matter, that you used something that was goby specific in your presentation in any of your shows?
Yeah, we used those. I remember we had some other little round, funny little plastic things that they looked like a solid tube.
Okay.
And they just had they were solid, and they just they had a couple of little tails. I think there was a thing Yamamoto did called an Ica. Just found out, but they were like that, but not really like it. And we had some that were sort of like this model color, like a goby would look, and that was dynamite. And of course, there was a couple of colors of plastic baits that we had. There was one called RJ Gold. It was by Gambler, and once again, it didn't look like a goby, but it had the same type of coloring as a goby had.
Yeah, it had the white body and it was
sort of a swirl of dark and light brown.
Okay.
And it looked like a lot of the goby things look like today. And then what I think the color might not be the biggest cue. I would think that the biggest cue when you're using a goby bait would be the shape.
Yes.
Not the color.
No, and
to me, that's what I would think in my mind. Yeah,
100%. And on the St. Lawrence Spark, it's just reminded us a great tournament bait that was used was the black swammer, matching goby. Obviously, it does have a similar shape. But what's so unique, or at least when you see video and pictures of these, is the eye. That condescent eye that they have. It is indicative of really the only other fish I can think of is a walleye that has that kind of eye, but it's an evil looking fish. I have to say the goby's an evil looking fish, but I don't necessarily, based on what our fisheries have seen, can we say at this stage that they've been a detriment to our sport fish? Would you agree, Jim, at that?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. I know a guy that I talk with here once in a while, and a couple of falls ago, he phones me one day and he said, "Do you ever keep a walleye in the St. Lawrence River and get gobies in it?" And I said, "Well, to tell you the honest truth, I said the only walleyes I've ever kept in the river came one day and I didn't clean them. A buddy of mine was just sitting in the boat and he just knocked them all off out of the live well. He was handing them to me. He was slabbing them. I was cutting the sides off or the skin off, sliding the skin off.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see what was in them. And it's the only time I've ever kept walleyes from the St. Lawrence River. But this guy calls me, he says to me, "What's the most gobies you've ever seen?" And he sends me a picture and he had them counted. He had them sitting in piles of 10. and it was a walleye. He doesn't keep a lot of fish, but he said, I kept this one. He said it ate a crankbait, and of course it was a crankbait, but he said to me, it ate a crankbait. He was trolling like a minnow bait, like a Rapala type deal. And the fish came up on it big time, went into its gills, it died, so he kept it. And he had 57 gobies sitting in piles. He had 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, and then 7 in a row laying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And he said to me, 57 of them in that fish.
Unreal.
Well, I mean, they're an easy source of food.
It's true. Lynn Pierce is sharing a similar story. Just out of curiosity, cut open a bird a few years ago, and then I cut out a simple. I will never forget the stench, and I can only imagine the stench of a half dozen rotten goby that came out of the stomach. But I'd have to say, I think about that when you catch those smallies in the Niagara River or in Lake Erie, and they're packed like I am after Thanksgiving. I'm thinking you split that stomach open, the reek must be unbearable. I can't imagine.
Yes, I guess that's why I know one time I was at a deer camp with the guys. I just dropped in. Actually, I came to deliver some beer. He ran out of beer. They'd been there for like 36 hours and they ran out of beer. But they had actually shot a deer and they were cleaning it. And I don't know what they did, but they cut something open that they shouldn't have when they were doing it.
Yeah.
And as we've discussed before, I'm not that good with smells the odd time.
Yes.
Like, I'm not bad. I mean, like, not like Lee. You just have to come up to Lee and go, and he runs off gagging. But
well, it's Steve, you asked a great question, and I know Jay is prepared to talk about that. But before we say goodbye to Jim, is there anything else that you wanted to let us know about, bring our attention to, or perhaps something that's upcoming this week that you're smiling about?
You have a smirk on your face.
I'm just, as I said, I don't know.
We're having a senior citizen moment live.
No, I'm smiling because you're smiling, because I'm not sure where we're going to go with this. But
I was thinking of something to say, and I love it. But I got the Shimano meeting this Saturday.
No, oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's
is it North American pro staff that you're going to be meeting?
Canadian corporate pro staff.
Canadian corporate, very cool.
Yeah, they hold it at the OFAH Center in Peterborough there, just over from Shimano.
Nice.
The Cordelucci Center there in the amphitheater, which is a great spot to be. I don't know how many of us will be there, but I know they put in a fierce two hours, and it's usually sandwiches from this great Italian place that they had there. It was the food that they get for lunch is just crazy. And then put in another hour or so and trundle back home.
That's awesome, Jim.
I'm lucky. It said 2 hours and 16 minutes there. I just looked a few minutes ago out of curiosity to see if anything had changed since the last time I was there. Apparently not.
No, you're good. You're safe. Hopefully the weather cooperates.
I'll probably go back roads. It's the same amount of time, but I like going up those back roads rather than just going down the 401 and up to 115 or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, not 115. Is it 38? What's the road there right at Harvey's there?
Yeah, that's 38. Yes.
38. Yeah, I'd go up to 38, but I'll probably go by the back way where you get off just by Brighton there.
Yeah.
To turn off to Brighton and go north, and it's one of these through, along through. You make 4, 5, 6 turns, but you're in the country the whole time. You don't have to. You're not driving 120 on the 4 or 100 on the 401.
28. I stand corrected. I thought it was 28. Beautifully.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw, sir.
Absolutely.
Hey, I've been training for round 2, eh?
God help us all.
I got that. The old left loosened up good.
Right on, buddy.
The chill
well, you know what? You keep swinging that around. I'm going to beg for a right. But in the meantime, dude, stay classy. Love having you here. Look forward to this every Monday. And as I said, safe travels, my friend.
Be good, everybody. Stay off the ice.
Amen.
Unless you know it's thick. Go to an outfitter or something if you want to go, because the outfitter, I'm assuming, ain't bringing you on the ice if it ain't safe.
Amen.
Yep.
Well said. Right on, Jim. We got Lawrence coming up right after this word from our sponsor. Take care, buddy.
When it comes to Canadian food, we've got your back with flavors like lemon pepper, beer batter, campfire barbecue, lemon pepper dill, garlic butter and chives, and crispy Cajun. We've got a mix for every meal. Whether you're serving East Coast shrimp, West Coast salmon, succulent walleye, chicken wings, or veggies, we've got you covered. Coat your food in outdoor flavors. Available online or at these fine retailers.
Lawrence is in the house. How you doing, Lawrence?
I'm doing well, buddy. How are you?
Oh, living the dream, as they say, living the dream.
Good.
Love seeing you guys come on here. And, of course, we're going to get into the science side of things with our buddy Jay. But, with where you are located out your way, I'm going to say that you've probably seen a little bit more of the evolution of the goby sort of firsthand, just based on your location. And, of course, I would have to think they likely hit your area first. Now, I know I'm going off on a limb when I say that because I think the St. Clair River was when they were first sort of identified. But needless to say, there's lots to discuss here because this fish and the effects of this fish are forever evolving. But needless to say, it's a pleasure to have you here, Lawrence. If, in fact, you have not seen this podcast or any others, please go over to Bluefish Radio. Lawrence has an entire library of some very interesting supporters, very interesting contributors, presenters, and a whole whack of other folks that are part of our fishing community and even further and certainly dive into a whole host of topics. So, again, as it's always a pleasure to see you here, Lawrence. You have any opening remarks when it comes to goby that you'd like to share?
426 podcasts on the Bluefish Radio Show. If you go to bluefishradio.com, 426 podcasts, and there's a couple dozen there from you and me now, buddy, at least a couple dozen. So, yeah.
And I appreciate that because, it's one thing to put one of these shows on, but it's another thing to do the editing and making sure that your sound is correct and all that. I don't want to say this is easy, what I do, but I think it's a little bit less time consuming than what you have to do.
I have the luxury of being able to edit up the foibles, you don't, you're live.
Yeah.
But you know what? I don't want to be heavy-handed with the editing. I don't want to lose the realness of it, right? It's got to be real. It's conversation. It's not TV. It's not, entertainment, right? It's meant to be, you're fly on the wall, participating 100%. Almost with the comments. But yeah, gobies, I'm up on the Ottawa River, the Ottawa, the Rideau, the Gatineau, they all come together right near where I live. And there's no gobies around here, right? We have dams and locks on the Rideau Canal system. And so, they just don't swim. Gobies don't swim. They hop all around on the bottom. They don't get around very fast or far. And they have preferred habitat. They don't like to leave that sort of habitat, like 10 to 20 feet rocky bottom. That's their magic zone, right? That's where they love to hang out. They did a study between some locks on the Rideau Canal, and they found some gobies. So they spent a summer measuring above the canal and below, above the lock, and then down below another lock. So they knew there was gobies in between those two locks. And over the course of the summer, they never detected any gobies had made it through the lock system. They just aren't capable of dealing with that kind of current of the water flushing in and out of those locks. So they figured the only way those gobies got into that part of the Rideau Canal was through a bait bucket, right? It's doubtful some pleasure boat dumped gobies out of their bilge. It's not that kind of, these boats don't have those kind of bilges, but for sure it was someone with a bait bucket dropped them in there, was fishing with them, let them go at the end of the fishing trip or whatever. And they've been populating ever since, but they haven't moved out of there. But, I did witness them, the way they changed the fish and the fishing on the St. Lawrence River was profound. And the way the gobies interacted with the St. Lawrence River over the last 15 years was profound as well. It hasn't been the same, right? I mean, when they were at their peak, they'd say there was maybe about 100 gobies in a 1 square meter of the bottom of the river. And you could find that 30 feet down, 50 feet down in the sandy flats between the weeds. There was gobies everywhere, and there was smallmouth bass everywhere. And the smallmouth bass were feeding on them in the sandy flats. The smallmouth bass were feeding with them 30, 40 feet down, and the smallmouth bass were feeding with them, on them in the more shallow areas now. That's not so much the case anymore. You don't get the gobies in those sandy flats anymore. You don't get the gobies down in the open part of the St. Lawrence Channel so much anymore. Where they are now is they seem to have settled into that rocky zone, like I said, the 10 to 20 foot deep areas where the rocks are, and the smallmouth bass will come and get them. The walleye will come and get them, and that's their favorite habitat. And I guess they feel the most secure there, and or they just all the other ones have just been gobbled up, so they don't spread out anymore, right? That's
well, it's a great topic, great segue, by the way, and you went into great detail. What I'm going to do now to further what you're saying is show the reach. Let's find out, because we say the Great Lakes. Jay just put up that they were found in the Rideau River at Smith Falls in 2000.
That's the lock there. Yeah.
So they have migrated to a certain extent, but this is information that was shared, I believe, 3 years ago. I might be wrong, but this is how far since the early 90s, late 80s that they were first discovered. This is how far they've gotten, and it's pretty impressive.
Goby was first discovered in the United States in 1990 in the St. Clair River, which connects Lake Huron to Lake St. Clair. It was presumably brought over in ballast water from ships that were previously either in the Black or Caspian Sea. Since its original discovery in 1990, the round goby population has spread rapidly in the Great Lakes and some of its tributaries. In certain areas, goby densities on the lake bottom have reached over 20 per square meter, about the equivalent of over 20 fish in the space of a bathtub.
That's outstanding. So 20 of them, and you're suggesting that perhaps
I heard 100 like 15 years ago. They were talking about 100. So I don't know when that film was done. Like every invasive, right? When they first take hold, the population explodes because nothing knows what they are, and so nothing's predating on them. They just think, "Oh, what is that?" Like all the native fish species, they have no idea what that is bouncing around down there. They have no idea that it could be potential food. I think the smallmouth bass were the first ones to figure that out, right? They were the ones that realized these things were nutritious popsicles and just started gobbling them up. I think the walleye came to the buffet table years later, and but I don't think you can explain the boom of walleye population in the St. Lawrence River strictly because of the goby. For sure, they had something to do with it, but they also say, there's less nutrients in the river because we're getting better at monitoring sewage releases. So there's less fertilizer going into the river. So there's less weed beds. With less weed beds, there's less perch, and with less perch, there's more of the food chain to go to the walleyes because the perch aren't gobbling it all up. So the walleye have more of a food base to predate from. So whether it's 100%, they are eating gobies though. We know that now. Like the walleyes definitely started eating gobies. I think maybe 5 years ago you started hearing about that. But before that, you'd never catch a walleye on a goby bait. But and that was interesting. Matching the hatch was crucial, right? To win a tournament on the St. Lawrence River, you really had to match the hatch, and a lot of soft bait manufacturers really dialed that in. And then they dial it in right across the Great Lakes. Like the baits that work in the St. Lawrence aren't going to be the same baits that work in Lake Erie.
Right. No, it's very true. And to your point, of course, I think that was the thing that has really interested me throughout the years, and I'm sure folks that are in the comments and watching would agree that we've seen one species after another fall victim to using goby as prey. I think initially, I'm not sure if they were the first, but smallmouth were almost immediately witnessed feeding off of goby. I don't know who was next, but we know walleye have. We're now aware that lake trout do. There's various other char species that also feed off them. What I was stunned to hear, which I still can't believe that they do, are salmon. Salmon have been found to have them in their stomachs. And you're thinking, when you think of salmon, outside of obviously, their visits back to the rivers, whether it be spring or fall, they're out in the deep they're in the blue water for a good portion. And I wouldn't think that the numbers of gobies would be out that thick, that far, but
they wouldn't be in 300-400 feet of water. I doubt it, but they'd be definitely in 30-40 feet of water along the coast when the salmon in September are starting to sort of stage and get ready to come to the rivers, and they're really strapping on that feed bag, really eating like crazy, and they're in that 20, 30, 40 foot range of water depths, cruising the shorelines. So yeah, that could be it.
What would be interesting, I'll probably have Jay answer the question, is are we taking some of those discoveries, like if like Lynn opened up a burbot, let's say you opened up a walleye on the Detroit River. I decided to cut open a steelhead that was running up one of the tributaries in the eastern end of Lake Ontario. Do we base those situations as a means of tracking the migratory pattern of gobies, or at least the distance in which they are away from the original source? Because I'm thinking of a salmon. To your point, usually salmon are the majority of salmon that are harvested are usually done so at the river mouths and what have you. I know there's an argument that a lot of folks go out in the summertime and early fall to target them in the big water, and they are taking them home and eating them then. But I'm just thinking, a goby that's eaten, say, in the eastern end of Lake Ontario, that salmon migrates to Bronte Creek. It gets into the creek. All of a sudden, you're finding a goby. Are we measuring that instance as a means of identifying how far they've gotten? That part I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, how do they get around? I think the introduction of gobies into the Great Lakes wasn't an isolated incident. I think it went on for years. Mm-hmm. Scientists explain it to me. A lot of fish species will put a lot of energy into building up immune responses to viruses. Gobies don't do that. Gobies put all their energy into spawning. They'll spawn 3 times a year. They don't care if they die. They just, they figure they'll outdo the viruses by just proliferating like crazy. So if you think, they're spawning 3 times a year, and that's a lot of fertilized eggs being dumped into the system. And it's definitely possible for ships just to keep scooping them up over on the other side and bringing them across the Atlantic and dumping that bilge water into the Great Lakes, whether it's Michigan or Ontario or whatever, as they pick up cargo, and or wherever they pick up that cargo. There's lots of ports where they dump the bilge water and pick up the cargo and leave with it. Yeah. So there's plenty of opportunities. There's been plenty of opportunities for them to bring those goby eggs over here in small fry and such.
And Jay is sharing some incredible data. Estimated around goby consumption range from 70 to 120 tons per square kilometer of Bay Equity. That was an estimate in 2010. Just remarkable. Big. Yeah. It's been estimated
that was the peak. Was 2010 the peak? I wonder if Jason knows that. Was that the peak of the infestation?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because, as I said, we're going to talk about the future of goby, all of the concerns that still arise when you speak of goby, and what the future of our fishery might look like going forward when it comes to these peaks and valleys of population growth, perhaps the presence of disease and various other parasites. So, as I said, I know a lot of it. What Jay's going to say is we're going to find out, because we don't know. But we'll leave some of the science to Jay, because I'm sure he's chomping at the bit. And
I'd like to hear his opinion on that report that the St. Lawrence River Institute just put out too, about gobies on the river, and that there's parts of the river where the gobies just don't go because of current, because of the sediment in the water. It's not to their liking, and a few other things, water movement. So there's gobies aren't they seem to be prolific, but they're not invincible. There's areas where they just don't do well.
I don't know of any other living thing that doesn't live for everything dies. So yes, everything is susceptible to death. If it lives, it dies. So
I think the big victim on all this is the muskellunge, right?
Yes, and of course that is the one apex predator or top predator in the food web that is most susceptible to whatever disease that is, that botulism disease that they have that's historic and synonymous with goby. They're the only fish that I've heard of that is having adverse effects. And I'll say this with all due respect to muskie lovers. I hope that's the end of it. I hope it stops there. But I have concerns that it might not. Now, we'll get into all of the science and all the details with Jay, but I know you want to talk about something that really took, I would say, center stage for me when I was down at the boat show, was the introduction of electric boats and electric engines. So I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, so me too. Like they really promoted the Toronto International Boat Show this year as come see the electric boats. 95% of the boats there had nothing to do with electricity, and but that's okay. There was a personal watercraft, a jet ski was there. They had electric pontoons there. Mercury announced a bunch of small new outboards. Yamaha announced the purchase of Torpedo. But I did get to talk to the editor of Plug Boats. It's a newsletter that's been going on for 5 years now. This guy travels all over the world. The electric boat industry is backing him, and he's a big proponent of electric boats. So I said to him, I said, based on what I understand, is that the big problem is batteries weigh a lot. And if you want to go further and faster in a boat, you need to add batteries. And if you keep adding batteries, you have to keep making the boat bigger so it doesn't sink from all the heavy batteries, right? Like if you look at that Ford 150 Lightning, and you get that truck, that electric truck, that EV, it's got 2,500 pounds worth of batteries in it, right? And that's if you think about how much your gross vehicle weight restriction is on a boat, to get a boat that can hold 2,500 pounds, that's a big boat. That's a big boat. So he agreed. He said, yeah. He said, definitely he said, but keep in mind, he said, an electric boat or a gas-powered boat, both will require the same amount of energy to move at a certain speed, any speed across the water. Doesn't matter what fuel you're burning, it's the same amount of energy to get the boat up on plane, to move it at a certain speed, and then drop it back off and then get you home again. The thing with gasoline, it can hold more energy than a battery can, ounce per ounce, right? So gasoline is super efficient at storing energy, and it's lighter than batteries. So that's where your savings is. But then he said something to me. He said, you know what? He said, no, anglers, you don't drive 2 or 3 hours at full speed to go fishing and then drive 2 or 3 hours to come full speed, come home again. And I thought, yeah, that's true, because I've done a number of tournaments on the St. Lawrence River where you definitely, went up the river to fish, and then you had to get gas up to come back down the river to get back to the weigh-in again. So I'm thinking, yeah, that was like 3 hours of full speed running, hour and a half each way. And you couldn't do it on a full tank of gas. You had to, almost burn through 2 tanks to do that. And so, that's the difference though. Even if you run out of, even if you fill up a battery on a boat fully charged, you fill up that same boat with gas, a full tank, you can go just as fast, just as far, for just as long in both boats. There's no difference. The difference is you can stop with a gas boat at a marina and fill up again, or carry a jerry can with you and top up the tank again and get home again. Or you can get back home, fill up, and do it again the same day. With an electric boat, you can't really do that, right? You can only do it once every 24-hour cycle. So you have to manage your time more. And that's the difference. That's the difference. You have to manage your time more.
Because, I think when, and I spoke to somebody from Mercury that we were talking, Brad and I were both there. And one of the things that I really like about the electric motor, at least the concept of it, is something that really we never even thought of back in the day when trolling motors became, this phenom. Like everybody's got, as soon as you saw spot lock, I think like sales of trolling motors went through the roof. But they require batteries. And yes, they hold a charge. They are somewhat efficient based on that charge and the amount of batteries that you have in your boat. But no one ever talks about that, right? Like we all think about, I would never buy a main motor that was electric. I don't even think I would consider having that as the only motor on my boat. When Brad and I were there at the boat show, I said right away, I think this concept and this idea is really cool for someone who's looking for an alternative means of power on their boat, but also something that is, turnkey. When it comes to trolling motors and those who do tournaments, you can appreciate, a trolling motor that you got to start, you got to make sure it's running. It doesn't run as much as the main motor, depending on, whether you're a guide or just a tournament angler. But at the end of the day, you never hear these current concerns that people have about that bow mount trolling motor as you do with this stern-based motor that's battery powered.
You don't have the what they call the range anxiety, right? Which is the problem with EV cars, is that you're watching your battery gauge go down. A friend of mine's got a Ford Mustang EV. He travels from Prescott to Markham, and he said in the wintertime, he only gets 150 miles of coverage with his Mustang. He said in the summer it's about 250. But so that means he has to stop halfway, and then he still arrives, and he's almost empty again. So it's frustrating for him. He said, and especially since quite often the charge stations for the non-Tesla charge stations are often broken, or there's a line because 3 of them aren't working properly. So it's colossal frustration when you think, oh my God, I'm running low, and now I've got to find a charge station. I hope it's not broken. That's just drives you nuts, right? Where the gas station, man, you run out of gas, you just need someone to get you a can of gas, pump it in and go again, right? So it's not as bad, but I hear you about those trolling motors. People are putting 2 batteries now. The tournament guys are all using 3 batteries. Now they're all using lithium batteries to save weight, and and a couple more in the back for their fish finders, and there's to start the motor, the big motor. So they got 5 batteries on board of these bass boats now, and they're all lithium. But and definitely the batteries are getting better, and we talked about that. Apparently, batteries are getting 7% more efficient every year. They're that good at improving battery technology, which means they're 7% lighter, or maybe they hold 7% more charge, or they charge up 7% faster, or they charge up 7% more often, so you can maybe get 10,000 charges out of a lithium battery. So now he said any electric boat you buy now, the battery will never die. The battery that comes with that boat will still be around in reasonably good shape in 15 years. So it's not the battery that's going to get you, that's going to problem. And the other point he made is that people look at the cost of an electric powered boat and they think, wow, it's quite a bit more than an internal combustion engine. But he said, yeah, but with the electric boat, you're buying all your power up front. If you had to buy all your gas for the next 15 years for that gas powered boat, it would be a fortune, right? I mean, can you imagine how much money you'd spend? But the big cost with the electric boat is the battery. Putting the electricity into the battery is relatively super cheap.
For now.
For now.
Yeah, for now.
But right. It is relatively super cheap, right? So it's not, in that sense, it's a big upfront cost, but what you're saving on fuel later on down the road is considerable, and what you're saving on maintenance is extraordinary. No more oil changes, no more winterizations, none of that stuff. More.
For the most part, no wear and tear on the components of the engine. Outside of impacts and various just general use. Sonia, it's an interesting comment that you make here. It feels like these electric cars are just another way to keep people close. I never thought of it like that. That's interesting. But to expand on that point, that was one of the things that I really appreciated about the hybrids when they came out, because it was not a yay or nay. It was not a black or white. It was like gas, electric. Because now you have to make that choice. The hybrids have disappeared, and to me, they were on the right track with the hybrids because you had options. And to those options, having those options sometimes would elongate your distance that you could travel. So when now you've gone to strictly electric, thinking that I'm doing good for the environment, I'm doing good for the world, blah blah blah, when in actual fact it's not feasible, it's not realistic. And as we saw out west, and Bill has mentioned, it doesn't like the cold weather. Some of these electric vehicles. And to me, I would be really concerned to have somebody, say, on the St. Lawrence, who has made that jump, that leap of faith, and have bought an electric motor. They're out in the middle of January, trolling for walleye, and they have no power. They can't move. What do you say to that motor at that stage when they're now going in the wrong direction?
Well, you're on the St. Lawrence River, so if you run out of power, you're not just holding still, right? You're gone at 3.5 miles an hour down the river. So that's pretty fast. You know, you're ping ponging off those buoys. You can easily slam into one of them, and if you're not careful, if you bang into one of those buoys just drifting, you can get sucked under. You can be flipped over right in your boat. It can literally flip your boat just by banging off one of those giant metal buoys that the ships navigate by. So you need some power to stay out of harm's way. So for sure on the St. Lawrence, you definitely need to keep your wits about you, and you definitely need to have some instant reliable power that you can draw on just to say, okay, I got to get out of here. I'm heading for trouble. Yeah.
So I'll say this, you know, it's a great first step, especially for those niche markets like those who have non-motorized lakes, ponds, or various other water bodies that they don't allow gas-powered engines to go on. Perhaps maybe they don't allow a certain horsepower. Maybe folks just want wind-driven boats. I mean, there's a whole lot of things here that an electric motor could be feasible when it comes to the use. But I think much like the car, I don't know. I don't know if we're just not there yet. But they are making motors now, Mercury especially, that we saw, that you're able to interchange the batteries, or you get a large bank of battery that becomes part of the boat. I still like the mobility of those smaller engines, and the fact that you can put them in a bag, throw them over your shoulder, and carry them to wherever you got to go. Again, this is all feasible. And to your point, perhaps maybe the batteries do last long enough to get your value out of it. But as it is right now, it's unproven in terms of its all-around feasibility to the boater, but I certainly think it has. There's a niche there. There's definitely a niche there. And
it's a lifestyle choice right now. These EV vehicles, people buy them so they can say, "Hey, look at me. I'm friendly to the planet." But even like people buying those cyber trucks now that you can buy $150,000, I think, for a foundation truck that they're pretty expensive, but it's not the 500 miles you were promised. It's 250 or 300 miles of range. It's not 14,000 pounds of towing capacity. It's 1,000 pounds or 10,000 pounds of towing. It's not 3,500 pounds of payload. It's 2,500 pounds of payload. So even Elon Musk, even though he waited and waited and waited, he delayed the release of that truck by 3 years, it's still the technology never caught up to his claims that where he wanted that truck to be. The technology never came up. So he just, at some point, he had to bite the bullet and release the truck, because everyone else's trucks were coming out. All the electric trucks, Chevy, Ford, Chrysler's got one out in the next couple months. Ram, I mean. So he had to get it out there at some point. And but people who buy it, it's a lifestyle thing. It's a look at me thing. It's not a tool. Those trucks are not tools. None of those electric trucks are tools.
No, I agree. And Richard brings up a great point, because you think about McIntosh, who has a generator. You think about Horwood, who does have power, but as I said, it's either solar powered or generator. And what they would have to do to upgrade their infrastructure in order to charge all of those electric boats. At the end of the day, I can't imagine the cost, and I don't imagine that it would be safe of fire.
You're charging them at night, so there's no solar, and then you got to run the generator all night, and no one's sleeping because you got that diesel generator going, right? And it's just no, it's not gonna. You need 2 engines, you need 2 batteries, a whole set of batteries you can leave there during the day under the solar panels to charge, or with the generator, and then you flip them out. So you almost need double the infrastructure if you're going to do that.
100%.
Yeah.
It would be. Yes, Jay, to your point, it would be crazy. We have time. Do you have any news items that you wanted to share with us?
I didn't get anything ready. I'm right in the middle of grant writing season, my friend. It's grant deadlines are piling down on top of me, and you want to put your best foot forward on these things. And so wish me luck on that. We're hoping to get some good dollars and keep the programs going and expand on some programs. And we got some great ideas. I think we got some great partners that are supporting us. So well, I don't want to say too much. I don't want to jinx myself, right? It's like saying, hey, I think I've got a job, and then it doesn't pan out,
No, yes, absolutely. And our buddy Chris Church just jumped on the line here, and we all know what's going on in the Enbridge's backyard. So I will leave your comment as apropos. Yeah, it's best leaving that untouched. You going to be at the Ottawa show?
Ottawa Boat Show. Yeah, we are. We do have booth space there. Our plan is to be there for sure. Thinking definitely we'll be visiting the Toronto Spring Fishing and Boat Show, not exhibiting there. I did exhibit there. We did exhibit there for a number of years, but we find that it's we try to limit the amount of travel we do, because the money we spend on going to a show, we can put that into programs and get way more return on the investment.
Great point. No, that's a great point, Lawrence. Really appreciate that. As we do every Monday that you stop by and share your knowledge with us. As I said, we're a lot further ahead and a lot more knowledgeable when it comes to fishing and what's going on with our fish. And as mentioned, if you missed this podcast or any others that Bluefish Radio has put on, Bluefish Canada has supported, by all means, head over to Bluefish Radio. Or you said you can go on
bluefishradio.com or any of those podcast providers. And if you say, hey, Doodle or Amazon or whatever, Alexa,
Alexa,
yes.
The
A word. So it just say the Bluefish Radio Show. And if you do that right now, the one that'll pop up right now is Jeff Butler and his plug boat interview. The guy's just a wealth of information. The things he's doing, the things he's witnessed around electric boats, we don't know 1/10 of it, my friend. There is so much going on, and I don't know why we aren't hearing more about it, but there's so much going on, and he's got some big plans for Toronto Harbor for 2025. Like, wow, that's going to be so cool. Hope that works out. Check it out. Yeah.
Appreciate it, Lawrence. As always, thanks so much for joining us, and just keep on keeping on, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. You too, man.
All right. We're going to have Jay Barnucz up next, but we want to share this segment. This is Goby 101. So this will revisit us back to the subject of Goby. Have a look.
Gobies are one of the only fish species to be able to feed on invasive zebra mussels, giving them an abundant food source that other fish cannot take advantage of. Additionally, they feed on and outcompete small native fish and feed on the eggs of larger fish species. They've also been known to be a vector for the spread of avian botulism. Infected gobies become ill and easy targets for birds who become infected after eating the infected gobies. Round gobies can grow to almost 1 foot in length and can live to be almost 4 years old. Females are able to lay about 90 to 3,800 eggs at a time, about every 20 days from April to September. Nests are guarded by males until the eggs hatch. One positive of the round goby invasion has been their role as a prey species for other animals, including trout and salmon, and the Lake Erie water snake, which was taken off the federal endangered species list in 2011. Overall, the round goby is a voracious and abundant predator in the Great Lakes.
Great segue, Jay. And as I said, you've shared a wealth of information. I will say this, which is interesting, because, of course, if anyone doesn't know anything about goby, you're in luck, because this gentleman here knows an awful lot. And we're privileged, as always, to have Jay here to talk about it and many other topics. But tonight it is goby. And what I found really interesting, because, of course, when gobies came over and we found out that they eat zebra mussels, we're like, oh, great. Zebra mussels were sort of the first invasive species that took over, that we were most concerned about. And then the goby soon followed. We thought the goby was our answer to the zebra mussel problem, which in turn, it has been to a certain extent. But as we have found out, Corey has mentioned that the white sturgeon are now eating zebra mussels. We know carp eat zebra mussels. I don't know about any other species of fish.
Freshwater drum. So sheep's head, freshwater drum. Yeah.
So there's a lot of other players that are eating away at that population. But needless to say, when it comes to zebra mussels, you're basically going to take it from the time in which they were discovered to where we are going in the future, and we'll get to that later. But Jay, thanks so much for joining us, as you always do. Where do you want to start?
Oh, Scotty, boy, this fish has been I've probably spent more time, not even purposely, but more time counting these things than most other fish out there. And a lot of that's because of areas that I work. So a lot of the river systems that I work are Great Lakes tributaries like the Grand and the Thames and the Sydenham, like but down near Wallaceburg, the Osable River, the Maitland, the Saugeen, the Sauble, and most of those systems, and actually all the Lake Ontario tributaries. So Bronte, 16 Mile, the Credit, the Humber, the Rouge. I'm doing myself a disservice here. Duffins, all the way over to like Port Britain, all the way to Bay of Quinte. I mean, Bay of Quinte, some of the best goby work research that's been done in the Great Lakes has been on the Bay of Quinte because we have so many gobies. Like that's the issue. Now, Scotty, like there's been some real positives with round goby. Let's talk about some of those. Like there's some interesting facts with round goby that I'm going to try and relay here that and some of these facts they could be mixed. So and what I say that is I might give you a fact and you'd be like, oh, that's really great. But then there's always, for everything that we want in life that's good, there's always a bad thing that comes about it too, right? Okay.
Yep.
So let's look at round goby in terms of benefits. Well, in the past, so since I want to say there was some publications done 10 years ago looking at bioenergetics in Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. So basically that's looking at the biological energy in the ecosystem, in the food web, okay? And smallmouth bass, for example, were increasing in size. And this is looking at length and weight, like combined, there was a ratio. And a lot of the smaller smallmouth, sort of between 12 inches and I want to say 15 inches, maybe 10 inches and 15 inches, they were increasing in size upwards of anywhere from 5 to 15% in size. So over I can't say 20-year period because the gobies didn't like just show up everywhere at once, right? They had to spread. Lawrence talked about how they spread slowly because they can't really spread on their own very well. They've sort of been spread by other means. But probably in a 10-year span, gobies in Lake Erie the smallmouth bass have the smaller smallmouth. This is the trick to this data. The smaller smallmouth increased in size. The bigger ones didn't really increase in size a whole lot, which is interesting. So I think what happened is that the smallmouth are gorging on gobies and they're getting bigger. But once they hit prime breeding age, they're not really getting a whole lot bigger. Like, because you're talking a 15% increase in size, that means like an 18-inch smallie is now like 21 inches long, right? Like that's not happening. But what's happening is, I believe what's happening is when they start to hit 16, 17 inches, they're getting into sexual maturity. Mm-hmm. They're able to put that energy back into reproduction with sperm and eggs, right? And we see that with walleye too. Walleye haven't had the same increase in size, but it's impacted most predators in the Great Lakes. Gobies are part of the food web. I see a lot of my colleagues in Environment Canada who do contaminants work showing me pictures of lake trout with their snouts all torn up. And why are they torn up? Because they're feeding on gobies on the lake bed and they're cutting their snouts on the zebra mussels. That's why they're doing it. Like there has been some benefits, but I don't think we know all the negatives yet. And I'm going to say this with a grain of salt because we talked about this before the show. You have these long-lived fish like smallmouth bass and walleye, and we don't see, and for smallmouth, we see it, we talk about egg invaders, right? So you have round goby who will raid the nest and eat the eggs. We only have about 20 years of good data from those interactions. And that's only, we're only at the tip of the iceberg, literally, before we'll see any real negative causes. So we've had positives when it comes to growth, but are we having negatives when it comes to recruitment in the population? So we haven't seen those yet. And I don't know of any data yet that discusses recruitment changes in the Great Lakes, but yeah.
Well, you have some incredible questions, and sorry, folks,
that's
if
okay.
I don't go far back enough to get to some of your great points. But Jay, you bring up one that immediately I thought of when Jay was talking about this. Perhaps is it possible that they now switch over to a certain prey? I'd like to think, based on the adult smallmouth that I've caught both in the Niagara and Lake Erie, it would suggest that they're eating these things pretty much whenever they're available. That the smallmouth don't get to a size and then all of a sudden they move on to something else. Would I be correct, or?
No, that's correct. Like, so generally we're seeing shifts, and I put up a comment earlier. I read a stat where prior to round goby invasion, so pre 2000s, Great Lakes smallmouth were primarily feeding on crayfish, upwards of 50% of their diet. And now round goby makes up, so crayfish make up less than 5% of their diet now in the Great Lakes. Now, or that's Lake Erie. I shouldn't say Great Lakes. The stat I read was for Lake Erie, so I want to make sure I stress that. But what happened to the crayfish? Well, probably the invasion of zebra mussels impacted crayfish habitat, because everything got covered in zebra mussels. So it's not just that gobies came in. Everything impacts everything else, right? But I do think, Scotty, that that in lakes like Erie and even Ontario to a point, but they haven't been in Ontario as long as Erie, right? Probably,
which is surprising.
What's that?
That's surprising to me. You would think they'd be in Ontario way before, say, Clare or Lake Erie.
No, they got to Erie first. But some of these things, they don't get detected right away, right? Like, I've always joked that some of those first ones that were caught or observed, I can't remember if they were caught by anglers. I know there's University of Windsor students were doing research on the Detroit River and observed gobies in snorkeling. And so I can't recall exactly how the first one was discovered, but we don't know how long they were there before they were discovered. They could have been there for a few years. What's troubling about goby, and some of the CFNers may not realize this, but they do reproduce up to 6 times a year.
6 times? I couldn't believe that when I heard that.
Yeah, I knew it was multiple times, and it's probably based on water temperature and how hot the summer is. But probably as we get into, as you know, and as climate change happens, and we're seeing, hey, if anyone's been outside in Southern Ontario this winter, you know. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
It might not be climate change, but it's definitely a changing climate.
Well, you know, one of the things about climate change is, as one of the theories is as the polar ice caps recede, you actually get stronger jet streams, or so the jet stream becomes more inconsistent. So more erratic, and because it's not as so much cold and warm, and so you get these erratic movements. Well, then species like the goby do really well. They love it, right? Because they like more temperate climates. And so the warmer the water, the better they do. But Lawrence touched on a couple good things about goby too. Good from a control standpoint. They don't like real fast water. They obviously move through those areas. This isn't black and white, but it's a guideline. They don't like real fast water. And in some river systems where we have lots of swift current, we haven't seen them spread as far, but it still shocks me how they get around though. Like, you know, like listening on here tonight, like Rocky's telling us they're up in Cambridge. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. So actually I jumped on, not that I don't believe you, Rocky, for the record. You and I always share good information, but you know, I'm a scientist, right? So I need to kind of validate some of these. And I did check on iNaturalist, and if anyone doesn't use if you're a CFN fish off person and you're not using iNaturalist to find spots, you need to learn that. Just telling you. That is a big tip.
That's a huge cat out of the bag now, Jay. Oh.
Okay. So, but there are records of round goby in Cambridge, and I'm not totally surprised. But what's disappointing about this is, and I want people to understand this, In the river systems that we have, this is a personal issue I have, is the smallmouth bass are very vulnerable in our river, Scotty. You know this. Big smallmouth, like in the Grand, the Nith, the Thames, the Saugeen, the Maitland, it's a very finite space. We're not talking like the Lake Simcoe or the eastern basin of Lake Erie. We're talking a river that is 100 meters wide and maybe a meter deep. And so we already have people keeping too many, fishing out of season issues, stuff like that. If we get gobies in these places, that's one more pressure on these fish that are already pressured enough. So that's more of a personal beef because I love river smallie fishing. And yeah, if we lose those river smallies, sure, they might get bigger from the gobies, but they're going to have to fend those gobies off because they're not a normal nest predator. They reproduce so much. There's so many of them. And I think the other thing I want to mention tonight, Scotty, is realize, like, I'm trying to look for something here to show you, but I don't think I have something big enough. Like, you look at some of the baits that are out there that imitate gobies. Like, you look at, we're talking less than an inch in size. And that's what most gobies are in the environment, Scotty. They're tiny. Like, these great big ones we see on the brochures that have the big black spot and they get purple looking, the big males. Those are not common. Those are quite rare. Those are big gobies, and they're as rare as like 8-pound bass. And if you catch a big purple one, that's very rare. A lot of them are literally less than, I'm trying to do my metric here conversion. So we're talking less than a centimeter long. So less than 25 millimeters. That's typically how big a goby is, less than an inch.
I was stunned when one of the videos we shared said that they grow up to 12 inches. They can get foot in size. I didn't realize they got that big.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen one up to a foot, but I've seen them in that sort of 8 to 9 inch range. And like they're like sausages, man. Like, and that's why they're so darn tasty to a smallmouth. They're not spiny. Like, smallmouth are not a dumb fish. And when they in that clear water of the Great Lakes, they can look at their prey items and they can be like, I don't know if I want to eat that. And they're like, oh, do I want to eat that bluegill or that rock bass or that yellow perch, or would I rather eat a goby? I'll bet you they're selectively choosing gobies. One, because there's so many of them, and two, they're just easy to forage, right? You don't have to move very far. So
interesting. And oh man, there's so much we can talk about. I digress. And I have so much on the brain, but when I was looking for some of the resources when it came to gobies, I ran into, of course, some of these folks that are also doing research when it comes to the Mad Tom catfish. Did I get that right?
Tom. Yeah.
Mad Tom.
Yeah.
And when I was looking at the similarities of those two fish, outside of those incredible dorsal or pectoral fins, it's very similar in at least its appearance. Yeah. And to your point, it has 3 very sharp prongs on all 3 sides. If it's facing up, all 3 sides. So those fish are very protected. Yeah. And because I'm glad Jim's not here, but I hope that those numbers don't increase to the point where a smallmouth bass says, well, I had something that looked like that on my mouth last week, but it stung me and I still haven't recovered. I'm not going to eat another one of these things. Do you ever see that happening?
No, I don't think so. But I think, and I'm going to read the comment here from George. He says, I'll just summarize the end here. To think we understand what is going on is purely a fantasy. Mm-hmm. George, that is very accurate, man. That is honestly what I believe is going on, is that I think that we just don't understand what is happening. And so, Scotty, like stuff with the Mad Toms and what you've mentioned there, that could happen. Like, nothing surprises me in the fish world. I'm looking through all these questions and I'm hopping on the Google machine. People would be surprised how much Google helps me do my job professionally. Like I am a wizard at finding information. Okay.
Mine too. But then you start talking about other species of fish or other, reptiles that it's had a direct benefit to. And it's funny that you said what you just said. And George, I appreciate your comment as well. Can we even say that it's had a positive impact when we talk about smallmouth, when we talk about the American water snake? or even sturgeon, as I think Lynn had mentioned that, sturgeon is starting to come back. Can we attribute to, and, goby, the goby presence as a means of bringing those populations back?
I think as anglers and even as professionals, like, I think that we can look at this objectively and say, here's positives, but also here's negatives, right? And I think the big lesson here with what George's saying, if we're
exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
That,
so, and this is part of that. If it fits my agenda, I'm hopping on that train, right? Like, this goes back to the uncut angling barrel trauma videos we just watched. And I think one of the bigger messages in those is, for a lot of the anglers who hopped on that on the forward facing sonar train, they listened to those videos the first 5 minutes. It met their agenda. Then they turned it off, didn't watch the rest. If they watched those videos entirely through, they would probably have a different perspective. But we are so blinded right now in terms of when we look at media, and if it fits our agenda, we're happy. And we're all guilty of, as anglers, I want to catch as many fish and as big a fish and as frequently as I can all the time. That is exactly what I want. But I don't always get what I want. Okay. And unfortunately, when it comes to gobies, in some cases we might get that, but what is the long-term impact of this? And I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we can really say we're there yet, because it's so dynamic. A couple things that people may not realize is gobies have survived here. So round gobies have. The tube nose goby, which actually, if everyone goes back to the CFN promotion for tonight's episode, the picture there is a tube nose goby, not a round goby.
Good for you. Good catch. Good catch, Jay.
Pun intended, Scotty. Pun intended. Good catch. So, and it's interesting about the tube nose goby because they have not spread as far. They were established in that same Detroit River, St. Clair River kind of corridor. And honestly, we've seen them. Like, I could think back to 2012, 2014, seeing them in the Sarnia area, seeing them. We've caught them in wetlands and like Peely area, Rondo. And recently I even caught some for work down around like western basin of Lake Erie. There has been records of tube nose gobies outside of Lake Erie, but very rare. And they really aren't as adaptive as round goby. That's what people seem to believe. So some of these species get released and or introduced, even they're not introduced on purpose. Like I told you, it's like picking up the complacent teenager and just dropping them off in the woods somewhere. Like, that is literally what gobies are. Right. But the tube nose goby aren't as bad in terms of they're not as adaptable. But I will bet that there's been lots of invasive species that have been dropped off in the Great Lakes that just haven't survived. Right. And there used to be a long list of potential invaders. There's other gobies from that region. There's the monkey goby, and there's others that were on the list of potential invaders. But because we have such stricter regulations, I think we've slowed that spread, but we never stop it, Scotty. We still have ships coming in the Great Lakes. We're not going to stop shipping. It's a huge part of our economy, right? Yeah. Yeah. So we just don't know in the end. And what we will see new invaders come in. Look at some of the cool stuff going on, which I didn't realize this. Like in Lake Simcoe, zebra mussels aren't the big problems. It's quagga mussels.
Yes.
The quaggas are doing better in Simcoe than zebra. I don't even understand that. But I'm not a mussel expert. I can tell you that right now. I know what I know when it comes to certain species, but not about zebras and quaggas. But the quaggas seem to do better in some situations. So we are learning, and this is stuff new. Zebra mussels have been around for 30 years, and we're just learning some stuff now about them. Isn't that something?
And I think that was the takeaway for me as I was reading this. As much as we think we know, and there's some great science out there, and there's some folks that, much like yourself, that are doing, all kinds of creel samples. We don't know a lot about these fish, this invasive species. And one thing in particular that is, like, you can see it even with the comments. What do we do when we catch one? is it important that we report every single one that we catch? And if we do catch them, are we to throw them back or are we to destroy them?
Yeah, so I think Jay Pierce mentioned earlier in the show, and it's basically, it used to be you must destroy them, but now that it doesn't stress that. It just, there's a problem with it because in some places, Scotty, there's so many of the darn things that if you just pile them all up on the pier, then you just have a big pile of rotting gobies, which when there's anywhere from 200 to 4,000 metric tons in Lake Erie, like that's a lot of goby. So I'll quote a buddy of mine who passed away this fall, and he was a real jokester about fisheries, and George knows who I'm talking about. But Al used to just say, toss it in the bushes, another goby, because there's just so many. It's not really doing much to just toss them. You might as well just put them back in because they're part of the ecosystem now. So
yeah, and Jay just cited page 22 or 2024 Ontario MNRF regulations. It talks about how you're supposed to dispose of them. In fact, you are to release them. They don't want you, because God forbid, can you imagine if these mad toms get caught and you end up destroying that because you didn't properly ID the fish?
Well, and that's what scares me. And I think that I'm going to try and share this link in the chat. Everyone should have this link on their phone. And because it's the Ontario or the Invasive Species Center, which is actually based in Canada. And it talks about, I'm going to try and find the link here. So it talks about a lot of the more popular invasive species, like round goby. And it even has a map. So I'm going to share the link here. I'm just going to be back with you in one sec. So this particular link will take you to the round goby link within the invasive species page. And if you go there, Scotty, it will actually tell you the distribution, the current distribution of round goby. And that's kind of across the Great Lakes Basin. And
if we use this link, Jay, not only can we find out how to deal with them once we caught them, but also how to report them as well.
Yeah. So if you go to that link, you can actually figure out at the top of the page, you can report invasive species from anywhere. And there's a phone number, an email address, or you can fill out an online form, Scotty. And I highly recommend keeping that on your phone, not only for reporting invasive species, but also for knowing, am I in an area where they've been seen before? That's important. And we have and Lawrence talks about this all the time, so many citizen scientists out there doing some great work. And this is exactly a good example of where citizen science has really helped fisheries managers out there. So I think that it's really important for anglers to bookmark these sites and to, keep them handy. Because if you, like Scotty, if you and I go up to Horwood Lake Lodge and we catch a round goby at Horwood Lake, we probably want to report it. I hope we don't. I hope that doesn't happen. But, it's so important to know where these things are. So I see here from George, kill and dispose of them. Same rule as when shooting cormorants. So there you go. So you're supposed to kill and dispose of round goby. I rarely catch gobies because of where I'm fishing and what I'm fishing for. I could probably count on one hand the number of gobies I've caught in the past year. So, but yeah, there are lots of them. Lots.
And hopefully we have enough dams and fast moving water to keep them at bay so they don't get too far in.
Well, hey man, dams don't work that well because they get above everything, like the ones in Cambridge. So let's think about that. So we have Dunnville, Caledonia, Wilkes Dam, Paris Dam, Cambridge Dam, 5 dams. 5 dams on that system. And sure, there are fish ladders on those dams, but don't tell me a goby can get up a fish ladder that easily. Like, they're not made to jump. Those gobies have spread. They've spread some other way. I doubt a fish ladder has caused them to, maybe a bird's foot. That's been published. But I honestly think a lot of the gobies that are the problem, Scotty, are these little tiny ones. Like, literally 20, like a small goby to me is around 20 millimeters, 15 millimeters in the size. That's all they are, is 2 eyeballs and a black dot at that size. A lot of them, if I gave you one, you might not even believe me that that's actually a fish. You'd be like, what kind of bug is that? Like, it's literally that small. But those are the ones that get, those are the ones that usually, I think, get lost in the shuffle. They get lost in the bait bucket. They get lost in the bilge of your boat. Like, those little tiny ones, those probably cause more introductions than the great big ones that we've been talking about, unfortunately. So
interesting. And it was I don't know what site it was on. I'm just trying to look at it as you're talking there. But it was 14 things to know about goby. And one of the things was how acrobatic they are and how they'll jump from here to there. I wanted to ask you, but you know what? Now that you said what you said, there's no point, because I didn't think that was capable either. But they were making these fish sound like they belong on Cirque du Soleil. But
Ed makes a good point here about the Detroit, and even Sparkus chimes in about the St. Clair River. So those rivers are fast. I agree, but they're littered with gobies. A lot of the nearshore areas in those rivers, there's a lot of areas without any flow. Mm-hmm. St. Lawrence is like this too. If you, where Jim and Lawrence were talking about earlier, like, you have, let's look at Lake St. Francis. Lake St. Francis is just a mass of islands and channels, right? Yeah. And the gobies, there's so many backwater areas of little pieces of habitat that they can get around in. The Detroit's like that. If you go to the Detroit River, there are areas where there's breakwalls, where there's lots of flow, but there's not breakwalls all the way down. There's little embayments up and down the Detroit, from Pesh Island all the way down to Amherstburg, little embayments. And those gobies just love those little embayments. But they don't love, I shouldn't say they love all the embayments. They're areas they can shelter in. They don't like I don't see a lot of gobies in areas of soft bottom, lots of macrophytes, lots of weeds. They don't like those areas. They kind of like harder bottom and, sort of moderate to low flows, which isn't very common in some of these places, but these things have found a way to get around, man. So, but we don't catch them on sand. Like, out in the Inner Bay here in Long Point, I've done lots of beach surveys on sandy beaches. We don't catch a lot of gobies on sand, but if it's a gravel beach, lots of gobies, lots.
So if we are, and I'm glad that some of the plastic producers were mentioned already. Obviously, for one, like yourself and Forever and Owen, who fish a lot of Lake Erie, you're part of St. Clair if you've been on it, and various other rivers that we know they inhabit. What is your go-to pattern for goby? Is there a special brand that you use? Is it a special color?
So I think I get back to what bass can see, not what gobies look like. And I think that we know bass, they can see blues and blacks pretty well. Okay. And they can actually see green pumpkin pretty well. And then they can see white pretty well. Okay. Chartreuse to them, it kind of looks white. So if you're fishing Lake Erie or Lake St. Clair or any of those Great Lakes connecting areas, you got to be using green pumpkin or black, or a black and maybe black and blue, but definitely black and green pumpkin are my two go-to colors. Presentation wise, it kind of depends on the situation, Scotty. I think that some of the, I use a lot of the Berkeley flatworms, Max Scent flatworms, and My favorite colors are goby. There's a goby color, but it's a green pumpkin with a lot of gold fleck and black fleck in it and some red fleck. But also just a straight black. And I think with those when I'm dropping those drop shots down to the bottom of the lake, I think that they're imitating small gobies. And I usually run a pretty short lead. Unless I'm fishing around a lot of larger rocks, then I'll run a longer lead. But most of the rocks I'm fishing in Erie they're not big. They're like cobble size or baseball size rocks. And you get the odd one that's maybe this big, but then you get the odd one that's taller than I am. But typically a lot of the boulders are fairly small. And I'm working on my bait around those boulders. So I like using a drop shot. In those situations, if I would use a Ned rig, but I don't like the Ned rig because it fouls up too quick. Because in those areas, Scotty, around those boulders, there's always a lot of algae. And if it messes up if you're always got to be cleaning algae off your Ned rig, that's annoying. But I think a Ned rig is a great goby imitator, and so drop shot and Ned rig, great goby imitators. But Scotty, I have spy baits that are goby colors that catch them. I don't think it's always like, does a spy bait moving through the water column imitate a goby? Probably not, but I will say that the color matches a goby pretty well. And so in that clear water, I still like the sort of darker greens and darker blacks and darker browns. So
it's interesting you say drop shot, and appreciate Ed's pro tip, because that is true. Just shorten up your. See, and I would have thought drop shot may have been the last presentation that folks would use, just because there is that separation between the bait and the bottom. And as we've heard, goby primarily like the bottom. Something came to mind, like a Carolina rig hooked up with a floating goby imitation plastic would be ideal, rubbing along.
We were on. Here's a funny story, and these fish were eating gobies. Okay, we were on a spot last summer. We were fishing a spot on Erie down between Maitland and Nanticoke. That's all I'm going to say, but way down from where we are. And we got out there and we were fishing these. There was a shelf and it dropped from 6 or 7 feet pretty quick down to about 10 feet. Like It wasn't a sharp ledge, but pretty sharp. So picture this, dude. I'm in the kayak and I can see we're talking 6 to 10 feet and it's a little choppy. So I'm sitting there and I got my drop shot and I'm looking and I'm just letting myself drift. So I don't have live target. I don't have forward facing sonar, right? And then what you do is you'll see like a sandy patch between the rocks. Yeah. And you'll see a smallmouth just kind of cruise over the sand and just bloop, drop it right on top of the smallmouth. And I have that short drop shot and like I won't drag it through the big rocks. So as I see the big rocks coming up, I would bring it up just so that weight's ticking the tops of those bigger rocks. And then I would drop it again if I got over the rocks to our sandy patch. And the trick was the sand patches, and I would just be going over. But sometimes you could see them. And as I'm dropping, you can see the smallmouth coming up for the bait. And they're feeding on gobies because we're bringing them in the kayak to measure them, and they're spitting up gobies. That's what. And the only part about that day that sucked, and this is a true story. We were in an online tournament, Trevor, Owen, and I. We all needed 18.5 inches or better to upgrade our catch. So we all had 5 fish in our creel. It was a month-long creel, or maybe it was a weekend tournament. We were all over 100 inches. We were all over 90 inches. We're all in the top 10 of this event.
Wow.
That day, I think only one of us upgraded. I upgraded 1 fish. I caught so many 18-inch smallmouth, but they weren't 18.5. They were 18 and a quarter, 18.2, 18.3. And on the way home, all I heard was the boys complaining about, that was terrible. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, anybody we know who, we literally, each of us caught 50 smallmouth in a half a day on Lake Erie. And they were all between, maybe a couple were under the 15-inch range, but I'm going to say the vast majority were 17.5 to 18.5 inches, nonstop. The only reason why we stopped catching them, Scotty, was I went to try and find bigger ones. Like I left the biting ones to try and find bigger ones because I could see the ones I'm catching. No one's going to complain. If you're a smallmouth angler and you're catching hand over fist 18 inches, no one should ever complain about that. But when you're in a tournament and you can only catch 18 inches, I understand. But it was funny that the boys were complaining so bad. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah,
It's funny. Sonia mentioned something that I think might have something to do with barotrauma, but why do fish spit up bait fish? She's never seen that. Being more of a kayak shore angler, so she's in a lot of shallower water, perhaps.
Yeah. So if you handle fish, Sonia, sometimes if you handle fish in a boat, or you're weighing fish, like, you know, I think sometimes we'll bring a fish in a boat, we might net it, set it down for a sec, get the camera out. And quite often, not all the time, but once in a while, whatever that fish has recently eaten might be regurgitated into the boat, whether it be on the deck, in a live well. And always check what they're eating. That's probably the best way to match the hatch.
Agreed.
When you're dealing with these predatory fish, you really have to check what they're eating. And you can't force them. Well, you can. That's just really mean. I wouldn't force them. I know how to, but I wouldn't. It's called gastro lavage. But basically, if they regurgitate on the deck of your boat, check it and then make adjustments. Some of the best stories I've heard was someone checking their live well at the end of the day going, wow, look at, they're all eating crayfish that are only like half the size of what I'm throwing. Then the next day they go out with a smaller profile crayfish bait and smash them. It's literally that. It's literally that easy some days.
No, that gastro technique that you were talking about sounds like that thing that you hold to your nostrils and it cleans out your air ducts.
Yeah, so
it's about as comfortable. So it sounds about as comfortable, and I'll tell you, neither one am I in a hurry to do based on that. But speaking of eating, I think that brings us to our last topic. I mean,
yeah,
I think it's a foregone conclusion to suggest that we have any idea where this is going to end up. And I would like to think that at that time, there's a possibility that neither you nor I are going to be on this planet to see its final chapter, final conclusion, if there is one. But in the meantime, we've talked about smallmouth, we've talked about perch, walleye, and just about any other fin fish that we know of that is feeding on these things.
Yeah.
My concern is what's happening with the muskie. That botulism, I believe it's the botulism disease that they have, and I'm not sure how they contract it necessarily, but is it possible that we start to see the same effects in other sport fish as we're seeing in muskie?
I think that's the big issue, and I think that so with muskie, and I don't want to be wrong on this, but I'm going to say, so gobies can carry the VHS virus. They're carriers, and for whatever reason, muskies seem very susceptible to VHS. They're very sensitive to it. Which, you know, the thing about muskies is that, man, they are probably like the toughest, meanest looking fish out there. But man, they cannot take a punch, those darn things. Like, and I feel horrible when I hear these stories about these muskie die-offs, because to grow these huge muskies, like we're talking 50-inch class fish, and they're floating down the St. Lawrence dead. It just, honestly, that is just sad. Yeah. And it seems to be that gobies can carry diseases, and all fish can, for that matter. And I've done research where we've had to collect fish and do lethal collections of fish to test for different viruses, right? So yeah, like a man. That's right.
Great comment,
so,
Rocky.
Easy, Rocky. Easy. Don't get me into that. But right, like I think that gobies are probably one of the issues with the VHS virus. I don't think that's been proven, but I do believe that they are a vector for VHS. In a lot of the Great Lakes, think about this. They're one of the only fish that is everywhere in the Great Lakes. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there's areas, I'm sure, of Lake Superior where we don't have a lot of smallmouth, but we got goby. You know, and there's areas all over that we don't have certain things, but we have gobies, right? Like gobies are just like, they're like sea monkeys, man. You just add water and stir and they are going to spread. But it is definitely, yeah, George, listen, George, lethal collection's a slippery term. We don't want to get certain groups coming after Scotty and the CFN.
No,
but
100%.
no, but to learn things, I joke about this, but you want to learn something in the fisheries world, you better crack a few eggs. It's true. If we don't kill some things once in a while, that is the true fundamentals of fish biology. You don't have to kill a million fish, but geez, you got to sometimes to age them and to learn about them effectively, we have to take a few out. That's part of it. So,
and as George says, it's a perk. It's a
well,
perk.
you know, George, I've said it before on this show. I have this knuckle here that right there, and that is from dispatching fish over the years when I can't find my preacher. If anyone knows what a preacher is, that's a nickname for the club, the old fish bonker. So I was always brought up. It was called the preacher, like the last rites. Like we're gonna. But I have a great fish dispatcher right here on this middle finger knuckle, and if you hit a fish just the right way, but that's honestly for joking aside, euthanizing a fish properly actually has to happen, and so we either overdose them in like a clove oil bath, or MS-222, which is basically just putting them to sleep chemically, or we bonk them on the head, and then before we start processing them, that is the most ethical way to deal with that. So
that's awesome. Well, Jay, you've covered a whole lot. There are some questions. Sonia, of course, is asking what a 50-inch plus muskie is in age.
It's hard to say how old it is, Sonia, but like they're a long living fish. They're not as long as a sturgeon in terms of age, but you're looking at decades, I'm sure. Yeah, so Ed just jumped in. So yeah, so that's probably a good assumption, Ed. Like the St. Clair fish are going to grow. They're going to grow faster, but die quicker than a St. Lawrence fish. That's pretty typical. So you're going to see St. Lawrence or St. Clair fish probably in that under 20 years, and you're going to see these St. Lawrence fish probably in that 30-year class. But a lot of those ones in if you've seen the St. Clair muskies, they're kind of long and skinny for the most part. And I find a lot of the ones in the St. Lawrence, like they are just beefcakes. Like their bellies are full, right? So they're slurping up those big suckers, man. That's what grows big muskies in those rivers. It's red horses. I don't know that for sure, but I am quite confident. Big red horses are like a big red horse is like a big goby, but to a muskie, okay? Because they got no spiny fins and they just slurp it down. So
that's awesome. Jay, as always, we can't say enough about how much we value your time. You stick around. You are the anchor of the panel, and as I said, a wealth of information from a science perspective that we just don't normally get. And as I said, can't thank you enough for what you bring to the show. Really appreciate it, dude.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, that's a good point. George says here on closing, John Castleman's muskie growth research, it's very cool growth variation. So in Canada we have Scott and Crossman, which is the freshwater fishes Bible. In fact, it's not even in Canada, but globally it's one of the best books ever written. So Ed Crossman's one of the co-authors, and his first grad student was actually John Castleman. And Ed Crossman and John Castleman are Ed's passed now, but big East Sockett fans, Northern Pike, Muskellunge, and pickerel. Jim's not here anymore, but pickerel. And so John's work on muskies has been it's some of the best work ever done on the species, and it's still, even though that work was done a long time ago, so to speak, it's still some of the best work that's ever been done on the topic. So yeah, look up some John Castleman information on Google. You're going to find some really cool stuff.
Right on. Well, Jay, you have yourself a great week. Again, we look forward to seeing you again next Monday. And just as I said to Lawrence, keep on keeping on, dude. We can't thank you enough for what you bring to our community.
My pleasure. Have a good night, everyone. Oh, and Scotty, I won't be here next week. I'm going to the police associations in Hamilton next Monday. Owen and Trevor are giving a kayak talk to their. It's the Retired Police Association of Hamilton. So we won't be here next week. We're going to be giving a seminar. all these clubs meet on Monday nights, dude. Trust me.
And that's awesome, man. I think it's so cool. And just as a side note, for all those who have started with us in the very beginning, I've always been a big proponent that Trevor get into doing presentations. And I mentioned at I think it was the last spring fishing and boat show. I said, dude, you're going to be on that stage soon. And it's not only awesome to see him warming up to it, but to see how he's thriving and doing really well.
Well, and I know I think you're going to see Owen and Trevor do more talking on stage in Woodstock than you're going to see me. Full disclosure, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome, dude. You take care and have a great week, my friend.
Okay. See you, everyone.
All the best. So there it is, another show. Thanks so much for all of you who joined us and spent the entire duration of 2 hours. We learned an awful lot about Goby. I'm going to play a video to sort of I would say describe how the future is going to unfold. And pretty much to Jay's comment, it's in the eye of the beholder. And I don't know if it's going to be our eye. I don't know if we're going to be around long enough to see, the last chapter in this Goby saga. But needless to say, as I said, for right now, we're relishing in the fact that it is helping out some sport fish, and it's having obviously great effects on keeping the numbers of zebra mussels down. But what that's all going to cost in the future, we don't know. Thanks to all who joined us. Of course, the Canadian Tackle Show, Canadian Tackle Shows.com. Please go there to grab your tickets if you haven't already, because we are going to be doing a giveaway as we speak. So let me give me 2 seconds. I just got to share the screen. There we go. All right. So this is what we're going to be doing for the next, 3 Mondays after this one, but 4 Mondays. So we're going to give away $100 in show bucks, and they're only redeemable at the show. But if you are watching, the 19 that are still here with us, if you are one of the purchasers of this, if you are the one that is chosen of one of the pre-purchased tickets, you're going to take home an extra $20. No, I didn't draw yet, Rocky. We're about to do it right now. So hopefully everybody understands. Please reach out to me. If you are here on the show, make sure you put a comment. We're going to leave it live for just a little bit. But if you are here with the show and you have purchased a pre-bought ticket, hopefully you're the winner. All I need is a number. Give me a number, guys and gals. How many times do I shuffle the deck? 1, 2, 3, or 4. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Any number between 1 and 4. 2. Fantastic, Ed. You are the bomb. All right, we're shuffling this twice. 1, 2, and here we go. No way. Oh, that was close, Rocky. Who is there? Is it Steve or is it Mike? Who's it going to be? It looks like Steve. Is it Steve? It is. Woohoo! Steve Morris. We will be reaching out to you as we have your email and contact information. But again, congratulations. You have just won yourself $100 in show bucks. And we're looking forward to seeing you spend it at the upcoming Made in Canada Tackle Show. Folks, as I said, love you all. You guys take care. Have yourselves a great week. And in the meantime, here's what the future has to hold for Goby.
Of the mussel and Goby invasion of the Great Lakes is still unfolding, but the impact has already been huge. The mussels have filtered the lakes, removing algae and absorbing industrial waste, making the waters clearer.
They're shifting back to more of the state they were before man interfered and changed everything. And so we're certainly getting close to that state.
What it all means for